Now, I guess pretty much everybody in this room is aware that former Prime Minister, the Honourable John Howard, had to settle for the second most important job in the country when he realised that despite representing Canterbury Boys High School in cricket, he didn't have the skills required to be the captain of the Australian men's cricket team. But he did a pretty good job at his chosen career anyway, didn't he? Please make him feel good about that. You know, since 1876, the coveted role of Australian men's cricket captain has been bestowed on only 46 men. Currently, the position is held by a man who came close to giving the game away, struggling to play for his state before finding himself in the unlikely position of being back in the Australian team and being handed the reins after a cheating scandal in South Africa in 2018. At the time, nobody envied him. Australia was making headlines around the world for all of the wrong reasons. But true to form, his experience, his steady guiding hand, and his ability to bring a team together, a torn team together, has seen him win many accolades. But the role of cricket captain is not an easy one. Depending on which media you read or listen to, Tim Paine is either a born leader who has many days ahead of him, or a man whose days are numbered. Perhaps that is the position that all captains find themselves in. The only views that really matter are perhaps the views of those who came before him. And I note in an article for ESPN, former captain Ian Chappell suggested that the only time that public conversations should be held to determine who will captain Australia next is after the incumbent has decided the time is right to step down. Perhaps the only man with more pressure on his shoulders right now is the Treasurer, Josh Frydenberg. But ladies and gentlemen, would you please make welcome the captain of the Australian men's cricket team, Tim Paine. Tim Paine, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
That's okay. As I mentioned, there's only 45 other people in this country that know what it's like to carry that pressure of being captain of the Australian men's cricket team. Can you take the rest of us into what that involves?
Yeah, well, it's stressful. Something I probably wasn't ready for is the amount of work, I suppose, outside of playing the game and captaining on the field. That's become the simple work. Especially I suppose the role that I took on at the time, the amount of work we had to do to get our reputation back on track, and the amount of work that took, not just from me but from our whole team and our support staff and Cricket Australia. It was a big job. I feel like sort of the last 12 months have been a little bit easier in that sort of space, but then we haven't played our best cricket, which has pulled the pressure back on us again. So I think the last sort of 3 years I've felt like I've aged a lot. I've missed a lot of time at home with my family and my kids, which is at times challenging, but part of what I do is the Australian Test captain, and it's a small sacrifice to make to I suppose continue to chase my dream, and wasn't to captain Australia, mind you, but I certainly grew up in the backyard wanting to play cricket for Australia. So like I said to GC tonight about my suit, I'm going to wear this as much as I can, because going forward I might not have it for a hell of a lot longer. Obviously 36 years old now, so I'm closer to the end than I am the start, but I'm loving the role. There's a lot that goes in it, but I hope it continues for a bit longer.
Can you take us back to that moment in South Africa?
Yeah.
Who called you? Were you offered the job, or were you told you had the job? How did that all unfold?
There was sort of two parts of it. The first one, I was actually at the nets in Cape Town, having a hit before I think day 3 or 4 of that test match, and obviously the day before what had happened. I sort of went in the next day just preparing to play again. I had a walkie-talkie, because the nets are like being at the other end of the ground effectively, so I got a message to come back up. We had a quick team meeting, a pretty sombre team meeting, where Dave and Steve both stood down from their positions. It was a sort of a bit of a shocked room at the time, and then there was a bit of silence sitting around, and Trevor Hone sort of stepped forward and said, we've still got a test match to play, and Tim will be captain and Mitch Marsh will be vice, so good luck, boys, go and get them. So that was sort of the first one, and at that stage I just thought, well, I think I was in my 6th or 7th test back in the team and probably my 10th overall, so I thought it was just going to be a part-time role, get through that test match, we'll get back to Australia and they'll appoint the next sort of test captain, and then a few days later I was in Johannesburg and I got a call from Pat Howard, who's the high performance manager at the time, and asked me to come up to the business suite at this hotel we're at, and I walked in there and James Sutherland was sitting in there, and I was pretty much told that there'd been a board meeting back in Australia, and it had been passed that I'll be the 46th test captain of Australia. So that was pretty much how it happened. Probably lucky I wasn't asked, because I'm not sure I was that keen on it at the time, but I still remember my wife had come over and my mum. I had a little girl, Miller, who was about 1 then, I think, and I don't know where they were. They must have gone downstairs to grab a coffee or whatever, so I was sort of in the room at the time, and I remember Mum coming back in, and she still says it looked like she thought I'd seen a ghost or something, because I was sort of just sitting, looking out the window, I spun around, and she said, what's up with you? And I said, well, I'm not too sure. I said, I've just been made the test captain of Australia. And she said, yeah, but it's only for this week, isn't it? And I'm like, no, it's full time. And she's like, what, the test captain, or are you doing everything? And I said, Mum, I have no idea. But yeah, I was pretty much told. So it was a bit of a rough start.
I can imagine if any of us had been in that situation, there's a few choice words that we might all have thought. What were yours?
Oh, yeah, if I'm totally honest, I shit myself. Absolutely. I didn't know what to do, honestly. Like I'd captained Tasmania when I was quite young, sort of 24, 25. And if totally honest, looking back, I was a horrible captain. I was a punchy, sort of aggressive, everything was everyone else's fault. It wasn't my fault as the captain. So that was, looking back now, that was something I learned a lot from. But at that time, that was my captaincy experience. So I wasn't confident, let's put it at that, but I did have, I had a little period in the Australian side where I'd come in and being a bit of an outsider, but I knew all the boys. I'd been to the academy, I'd played for Australia A, I'd been around most of the group, so me coming in from the inside, I suppose I wasn't much of a threat. I don't know if any of you are watching Big Brother at the moment, but you have those alliances, and I was pretty much in the middle, so I was sort of at an advantage there where I could sort of talk to both sides and mediate the situation a bit. So I'd done that for a few test matches, and then when I sort of took over the captaincy, I'd sort of built relationships with everyone in the side, so that sort of worked in my advantage.
Yeah, I want to talk a little bit about relationships, because it would seem to me that at that time, in that moment, that was probably the most important thing. Was there anyone that you phoned or contacted and said, I need some help here?
Not initially, again, because I didn't know if I wanted to do it, to be totally honest. And at this stage, I had no idea what the job entailed. I didn't know how big it was, and people had spoken about it being, the second biggest job in the country, and I just thought, it can't be that hard, really. I mean, you've got to change the bowlers, and if Josh wants a rest, he'll let me know, and Davey will field it mid-off, and occasionally he'll come back to first slip. It's not that difficult, but yeah, so much, I suppose, came with it. And
so tell us about that. What's the added pressure? Because I know most other captains would be able to tell you that it's the pressure of the external stuff that can impact on your game in the end.
Oh yeah, and I was a captain that the majority of the media said I shouldn't have been in the side at the time. So
and how
I'm
did
juggling,
that make you feel?
Oh, not great. And obviously I'm human like the rest of us. So
do you read the media? You listen to the media?
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, I love the media. I love sport. I love watching footy, reading articles. That's one of my passions. I love doing that. So I'm not the sort of person who hides away from some bad media or doesn't read stuff. I'm happy to read it, and I've got some good relationships with some of the media. I realise they're there to do a job, and again, since I've come back into the side, I realise that they're doing a job. They're critiquing the cricketer and the captain and the wicketkeeper. It's not a personal attack on me as a person, and I'm 36 years old, like I said, so I've grown up, and that stuff doesn't affect me one bit. I've done a bit of commentary as well, so I know what it's like to be on that side of the fence, and you call it as you see it. And as I said, they're not judging the person, they're judging the cricketer or the captain, and that's their job.
So that external stuff again, take us through that.
Yeah, well, that went through the roof, particularly when you live in Tasmania. You don't get a lot of media attention. Yeah, so for all of a sudden to be front and back page, and particularly when we came home, and after such a big story, yeah, it was hard work. And the Australian cricket team's in a really different situation where we all live in all over the country. We're all playing for different Big Bash teams. We all go to different IPL teams. So the time we can actually get together and build those relationships and mend those relationships is really challenging, and one of the most difficult things about bringing this team together. So yeah, I had to spend a bit of time with some people and trying to mend some bridges, if you like, and get the team back together and back playing cricket for the reason we started, and that's because we love it. We love playing for our country, and we want to win. So yeah, there's lots of stuff that goes with it, but just I think stripping it right back to the really basic things of why we did it, and having some common themes and some common themes and goals around our group really helped. And obviously Justin coming in as well, who was a bit of a disciplinarian, particularly on the way we behave and go about it. He sort of made my job a little bit easier as well.
So that's one of the relationships I wanted to talk about, your relationship with Justin Langer.
Yeah.
Because even aside from the cheating, there have been other issues that you've had to handle, haven't there? You know, the time when Australia was the only team that didn't take a knee.
Yeah.
These sorts of things, Black Lives Matter was, you know, going around the world. It was a global movement,
Yeah.
evidenced across a whole lot of sports. Can you take us through some of the discussions that you had with Justin and about setting the agenda and what the team stood for,
Yeah.
how it should address things like that?
Yeah, look, that was a big moment. I actually wasn't there for that. I was at home. I think that was mainly a one-day tour. So again, I think the way that worked, those guys sat in a room, and that's one of the things we've had to start doing a lot more, is getting guys in a room, talking about things we're passionate about. If guys want to make a stand for that stuff, then that's great. We totally support that. There are other guys that weren't so sure and wanted to gather more information, and that's totally within their rights as well. But yeah, JL's, he can be a little bit grumpy, but he's a heart on his sleeve, and he's really strong in his beliefs, and sometimes he can force them onto us, and sometimes we fight back, and I end up sort of being the one in the middle trying to mediate it again. But yeah, my relationship with him's been excellent for a long time. Since I was a young guy, I came into the Australian setup. He helped me out, but I think the one thing he's trying to bring in, and that period of time was one of those things, is where guys are free to be themselves in our team. They're free to behave and support things that they want to support, and we'll help them do that. And obviously we've got a great platform in Australia and around the world to make a real difference. So it's important that guys feel that they can express themselves in that way.
How much outward looking is there from your perspective? Because it's been said before that perhaps one of the things that got Steve Smith so caught in that moment was that his whole life was cricket, and that ability to stop and look out and put things into context.
Yeah.
How important is that for you? And do you look at other sports? Do you look at other leaders? Do you look at politics or business?
Yeah.
Do you read widely?
Yeah.
I mean, where do you get your understanding of cricket's place in the world?
Yeah, I read a lot. I write a lot down from coaches and leaders and captains of sports teams that I've seen that I like and that resonate with me. And I guess the trick is finding different things for me that resonate with my team as well. But yeah, I've had a bit of a blank where I was going with that. But
where you get your motivation and where you see cricket fitting into the bigger
back
world.
to Steve, sorry, with the bubble stuff. Yeah, it is very hard for guys like that who are 12 months of the year. It's just tournament into series into tournament into series, and I think sometimes you do get stuck in your own bubble, and everything else becomes a little bit irrelevant. And I think that was happening in the Australian cricket team. We were so focused on what we were doing and what was happening internally that we actually forgot about things that matter outside of our team and people outside of our team, and what people think of us, and how we treat spectators and fans and sponsors, and how we treat opposition players and umpires. But for me, again, I was at a bit of an advantage because I had been outside of that bubble for 10 years. And I sort of got the sort of man on the street feedback that, you know, the Australian cricket team's on the nose a little bit, the way we behave, the way we're going about it. So It's a challenge, something that I know that we're trying to work with now with resting players and giving them time to go home and go and play in other tournaments to get outside of the bubble. But until you're in it, it's really hard to explain that it's, you know, that next test match and that next series, that is our life. That is what we operate for. So for sometimes you get the blinkers on, and whether that's good or bad, sometimes for someone like Steve, he needs that. That's why he is the best player in the world. But obviously then you forget about some other stuff, and it can build up on you and you make bad decisions, and yeah, we were certainly a part of that.
Should he get the opportunity to captain again?
Yeah, well, I think so. Obviously I don't make that decision, but yeah, I thought the time that I played under Steve as a captain, he was excellent. Certainly tactically, he is as good as you get. And he's probably a bit like me at the start of my captaincy journey when I was in Tasmania. He was thrown into a very big role at a very, very young age, and he probably wasn't quite ready for it. But by the time I'd come into it, he was growing into that role and getting better and better. And then obviously the South African events happen, and yeah, he's not doing it anymore. But yeah, I would support him getting that job again if that's what they see fit, and if he wants to do it, more importantly.
I've seen a photo of both of you when you were making your debut. Yeah,
get that one up.
What was it, Lords?
Yeah,
2010.
That's our favourite photo. Comes up in every team meeting. We reckon Smudge has got a little bit better looking over time. But
the two of you, you know, both so young. How would you say you have changed, and how have you grown in the time since then to make you the leader you are?
Yeah, I've learnt and grown, I think, through experience, to be honest. And I've had some really high highs at a young age, and then I had some really low lows. You know, talking about not getting a game for Tasmania, I was struggling to get a run in second 11. I couldn't get a run in club cricket. You know, I completely lost my way as a player. And then sort of having to find your own way out of that, and I was lucky I had some people around me to support me. But I learned a lot about myself in that time, which has now helped me grow into the leader and the player that I think I've become now. So, and by no means am I the finished product. I'm still learning every day in leadership. I've still, you know, I hear people talk about, you know, what good leaders do and what's your philosophy on it and stuff like that. I have no idea, if I'm totally honest. I just go about it and try and do the best job I possibly can. Try and make good decisions. I said it before, like I sometimes sit back and think, what would Tim Paine do if I wasn't in this position? What would I think if I was sitting in the lounge room? How would I handle this? Yeah, so I've been really lucky to have the ups and downs that I had. I certainly didn't expect to be back where I am, but I'm really thankful now for the difficult times that I had. Allowed me to grow as a person, allowed me to grow as a teammate, and sort of learn, you know, that it's not all about me. Yeah, so very fortunate back where I am, and just trying to make sure that the mistakes I made earlier I've learned from and I've grown.
So if you were to take the word cricket out of your vocabulary and you were to tell this room what sort of a person you are, what would that be?
Pretty normal, I would say. There's not, yeah, I think I'm pretty low-key. I'm pretty loyal to those that are close, and to people that are loyal to me. But yeah, I'm honestly just pretty much a knockabout, normal Australian bloke, lives in Tasmania. There's not a heap of frills and whistles, if you like, or whatever you want to say. I am what I am, and what you see is what you get. That's been a big thing for me, is to continue to be myself. You know, I'm captaining Australia, and there's a lot of responsibility that comes with it. But I think, you know, if I can be authentic, I think people relate to that. People enjoy someone that's going up and just trying their best and being themselves, and that's something that it's a key part of my leadership philosophy. Is just to be myself, and sometimes it's challenging, but so far we're doing okay with it.
And yet it would seem to me that your greatest skill is exactly what you say. You give off this kind of persona of being the everyday man in the street.
Yeah.
And yet it's obvious from the balance that you have and the way you are so sure-footed in who you are, that there's something...
I'm glad it looks that way.
There's something much deeper.
Yeah, maybe there is, and you know, again, I haven't thought too much about that, the question you asked me. before, as I said, I do what I do. As I said, I think I've just learnt my way through experiences. I've been in cricket for a long time, which certainly helps. I've been around some good teams, I've been around some good bad teams, some good coaches, some bad coaches, and all I've tried to do along the way is pick those things up and write them down and learn from them and try and mould my own sort of style and path, if you like. So, I'm sorry if you're looking for some sort of magic potion, but I haven't got it. As I said, I just try and go about things as I would, and I'll continue to do that.
Yeah, I think it's a mark of the man that you probably have to speak to other people to get them to say the things that you're not saying about yourself. And I think that comes back to the whole thing of ego and being part of a team and very much feeling that everybody's in balance. To get that winning kind of cohesion, how much of it is chance and how much is it really hard work and getting everybody to buy in to the same mission on that day at that time?
Yeah, it's one of the challenges. I think if we could all bottle that up in sport, it would be worth a lot of money, wouldn't it? That's what we're always chasing, is that the good teams I've played in are that we're all aligned. We have one simple goal or message that we're all chasing, and that keeps everyone aligned and everyone tight. And that is a very, very hard thing to get in high level sport when you're dealing with some big egos. There's always lots of things at play behind the scenes. You need to get the right leadership, you need to get the right coaches, you need to get the right talent. But when you're in that moment and you know your team's on that, you've got to try and bottle it up and hold on to it. So again, very difficult. It doesn't happen a lot unless you're at Hawthorn or the Melbourne Stars, the Melbourne Storm. Sorry, not the Melbourne Stars. God, they don't quite get it. But it's a special feeling. It's hard to get. I think it just takes a lot of hard work. It takes a lot of trust. It takes time. It takes time to get to know people and to build team cultures like that. It's very hard now to click your fingers and have that sort of winning culture and team first culture overnight. It takes time. It takes work. And you have to talk about it, I think, as well, and revisit it and see where you're at and keep measuring yourself on where you want to be and where you want to go.
Greg mentioned before the test series against India, and I think Darshak mentioned it too. I mean, that was just incredible watching every moment. You couldn't miss it. It was just ebbing and flowing. And yet Greg mentioned that there was other stuff going on behind the scenes. Can you take us there?
It was a challenging year for everyone, wasn't it? The COVID year, and there was always stuff going on. That's part of the challenge of playing against India. They're very good at niggling you with and trying to distract you with stuff that doesn't really matter. And there was probably times in that series where we fell for that. A classic example is when they were saying they weren't going to go to the Gabba, and so we didn't know where we were going, what was going on. So they're very good at creating these little sort of sideshows that took our eye off the ball. And that's what they did. At that time, we needed to focus on us and what's important to us and what we were doing. And at times, during the COVID stuff and the border stuff and where we might be going, where we might not be going, I think we got a little bit distracted, and as a result of that, didn't play our best cricket. And India did, and were too good for us.
Talk about COVID a bit more, and we've seen what's happened recently in the IPL. And that very difficult position that I think sports governing bodies find themselves in. Cricket Australia's found itself in numerous times. Players' associations find themselves in, where athletes don't necessarily want to be treated differently to anybody else, but they are. By the nature of the big business, the high profile, national teams playing other national teams, or in the case of the IPL, really big business. And so here you have cricket tournament taking place, people in the street don't have access to good medical care, they don't have oxygen, but all the cricket players do. They can be flown out with a private jet. Other Australians still can't get home. Do you think about those things and how that plays out in the general discussion, people in the street? There are people that understand it, there are others that don't and think it shouldn't happen. We've got all this conversation happening at the moment with Tokyo, should the Olympics go ahead, all of that.
It's a challenge because us as sportsmen, we want to be playing, don't we? We want to be there. We want to be playing in the IPLs. We want to be playing. We want to be going to the Olympics. We want to be testing ourselves against the best in the world. That's what we've trained for. That's what we've grown up wanting to do. But yeah, seeing some footage from India at the moment, it's difficult to sort of comprehend being there, playing cricket when that's going on around you. And I haven't got into too deep a discussion with the boys so far on how they actually feel about it. But yeah, I know they were struggling with it. And the thing with those guys is it's not like they're not asking for special treatment. They're not asking for chartered flights. I mean, Slats is, but he's on his own there. But yeah, it's a challenge, as I said. That's what we want to be doing. At the same time, I know like a thing in India where, speaking to Camo, that they wanted those guys to keep playing because it was giving the Indian people some sort of enjoyment through their day. So it's a fine line. It's a balancing act. I wouldn't want to be working in government relations or at the top of Cricket Australia at the moment or the BCCI because it is such a difficult job, and not everyone's going to agree with whatever decision's made. So yeah, I think in the end the right decision was made to call it off, and now there's obviously some stuff going on and trying to get them home. But yeah, at no stage have any of those guys asked for any special treatment. They're in a very privileged position, obviously, and I'm sure they would love to be able to help other Australians get home. But as I said, they're cricketers, they're humans, and yeah, it's a very difficult time for everyone.
Now, I'm not suggesting that the end is nigh, but what considerations have you made to what happens after your playing days? What are you going to do?
That's a good question. I've got a few different options. I think initially when I finish, I probably won't do a lot. I'll probably have a bit of time off, spend it at home with my kids. I've missed most of that. The last sort of I've got a 2-year-old and a 3-year-old, and I've been away for a lot of that time. So the last few months at home, they're just actually starting to like me. And occasionally when they cry, they come to me first, which is a nice feeling. The first few months, they just run away from me or cry when I actually tried to pick them up. They didn't know who I was. But that's something I want to do. I want to get home. I was actually talking to some guys before as well. My whole life since I was 16 has been in sport and in teams, and it's actually taken COVID and spending more time at home to realise sort of, one, I love being at home, but two, I really miss being around the boys and the group and sport and competing. So I've sort of been bubbling away with my coaching stuff since I was sort of 24, 25. So I hope to be finished by the time my cricket career is finished. So that's one option. Maybe a little bit of commentary. I've got some other business interests. We've got one with George Bailey, actually. We've just opened some gyms down in Tasmania, Body Fit training. So if anyone needs a good gym to go to, Body Fit is the one. So I might get in there, do a bit of work. But I think, as I said, the first bit is just to spend a bit of time at home being a dad, reassess. I'm certainly in a much better position than I was 3 or 4 years ago when I was going to work for Kookaburra. So that's not a bad thing.
Now, I mentioned before, talking about relationships. There's one relationship that some people might consider is a little unusual, and that is your relationship with used sport shoes. I've heard that people have, libraries of books in their house,
yeah,
but you've got shelves full of shoes. Is that correct?
I don't know if I've got shelves, but I've got a lot of shoes. And the reason I started, actually, it was about 4 years ago, because I thought, well, I'm just about done. So I started to order a few more, and I thought I'd just box them up, keep them, so when I'm 50, I'll still have a pair of shoes. And anyway, because anyone who knows me, Hoff will back this up, I don't like spending money, unless it's for a good cause, of course, like the Chappell Foundation tonight. But yeah, so that's kind of how it started, and now I'm still on, and I'm still ordering shoes, so it's kind of got a bit out of control. But I work my way through them. Let's put it that way. I'm wearing them all, and but I do look after them. I do clean them. I'm known to sort of come off the ground, actually, even with the cricket spikes, and towel them down and use Dettol. I think what's the thing I put on them, Hoff? Isocol. That's one. It's great for cleaning your sand shoes and cricket shoes if you need to. So I do take great pride in them. I like to look after them, but options is good when it comes to footwear.
Is that a bit unusual, do you think?
I don't think so. Is it? I think a lot of people have. You'd have.
Can
a lot
we have
of shoes,
a show of
wouldn't you?
hands? Does anyone in the room do that?
See?
Oh yeah, there's a couple.
He's a young wicketkeeper too, so he knows what
Cricketers,
it's like.
yeah.
You got to look the part.
So Tim, how grateful are you that you were talked out of not giving the game away?
Very now. Yeah, it's interesting. I'd like to see where I was if it went the other way, but yeah, I mean, at the time, I've said to people, I was happy to do that. I had a 2-year Big Bash contract still with the Hurricanes, and I'd taken the job with Kookaburra, so they were going to allow me to play in the Big Bash. And I spoke to some people in Tasmania and said, look, this is probably what I'm going to do. One of them was Mike Farrell, GC, who you know, I think rang GC and told him that this is what Paine was thinking, and GC actually rang me and said, we're looking at probably playing you in one of the T20 series coming up for Australia, so you might want to hold on at least till then. So I went a bit longer for that, played in that, then played out the season, and then had a bit of a contract dispute with Cricket Tasmania. It wasn't really a dispute, I just said I'd like to play for 2 years, otherwise I'll take the opportunity to work with Kookaburra and start the next sort of phase of my life. And I think they thought I was joking, so I came back a few days later and they said, oh, here's your contract, 1 year, will you sign it? And I said, no, that's fine. I'm happy to go, and shook their hands and left. And then I rang Ricky actually and said, oh, sort of taking the mickey a little bit, because he obviously bought his mansion in Brighton. I said, is there any houses for sale near you? I'm looking at moving to Melbourne. And he said, what are you doing that for? And I said, oh, I'm taking a job for Kookaburra. And he said, why? I said, this has happened and I've had enough, and it's okay, I'll still play a bit of Big Bash. And he goes, you can't do that. Got off the phone, he sort of said, oh, I'll ring a few people, see what's going on. And then about half an hour later, actually, my phone rang, and it was the incoming CEO from Cricket Tasmania, who wasn't taking up the role for another few months, Nick Cummins, who'd come from the Sydney Thunder, and he said, you'll have 2 years. Obviously can't give it to you now because I don't start for 2 months, but you have my word, and if that's the case, will you keep playing? And I said yes. So very lucky to speak to Greg, very lucky to have a friendship with Ricky, and very lucky that Nick Cummins was coming to Cricket Tasmania, so it was a bit of a perfect storm.
Who do you think's been the biggest influence on you?
Tim Coyle, Tasmanian coach. He was also a wicket keeper, but my playing career for Tasmania sort of followed his coaching career. So when I came into Junior Tigers as a sort of 12-year-old, Tim Coyle was the under-15 coach. I got picked in the Tassie under-15s then. Then he became the under-17s coach as I played under-17s, under-19s, the same thing. Then he became the state manager as I went into a rookie contract. And then 2 years after that, he became the state coach. So my career literally went perfectly with him, and I owe him a hell of a lot for making me the player and the person I am. But he was also with me in that really lean trot as well, and never sort of gave up on me. So he's quite clearly actually the biggest influence on my career. And then as a young Tasmanian, to have access to someone like Ricky, who was an idol of mine growing up, and now to have a relationship with him and someone that I can bounce stuff off and talk to him about. He understands what I'm going through, and to have his help in that critical moment as well probably didn't hurt. So they're probably the two biggest.
And so, just between friends, how much longer do you think you'll be the captain of the Australian cricket team?
I don't know. Well, another 6 tests. But I've been like that the whole time since I came back in. I came back into the team at 32, 33, and I remember when I got picked in the Ashes, I was like, I think the first squad was picked for the first 2. And I thought, gee, I'd love to play a test at the Wacker. And that was the 3rd test, so that was kind of the goal. And then I played at the Wacker and I thought, geez, I'd love to play at Boxing Day. And then I got that, and then I got halfway through Boxing Day and I thought, geez, I'd love to go to South Africa. That'd be a great tour. Never ever did I think I would make it till the next Ashes. And certainly didn't think I'd make it to the one after that. So, look, every day I'm in this job is a bonus to me. And since that moment, I haven't looked past the next couple of tests or the next series, and this will be no different. If I feel like the time's right and we've beaten the Poms 5-0, then what better way to go out on this ground too. So that's obviously one option, but it might be a tight series and we might be chasing 300 in the last day, and I might be 110 not out when we hit the winning runs, and I think, well, I might go again. So we'll just have to wait and see.
Ladies and gentlemen, would you please thank Tim Paine?
Thank you.
Stay there. Are there any questions from the audience tonight?
Well, that's dangerous.
Just while we're waiting for that. Any questions?
No, good.
Good. Tell me this. Yeah. Greatest moment that you cherish?
Well, definitely probably that moment there. I think when we retained, well, people say retained, we won it, let's be honest, all we had to do was win 2 tests to win it. So when Big Josh hit, was it Craig Overton on the pad, that was one of the greatest feelings of all time when I heard that thud into his pad. In my view, I mean, I haven't been great at DRS, but that one looked pretty good, so we celebrated. I think the best part of it, though, was that he reviewed it and we get to celebrate it again. So, yeah, that moment, we talk about sort of teams that are all pushing for that one thing, and everyone was aligned for that one goal, and that moment was pretty special for everyone in that photo, I reckon.
Yep, someone's got a question over here.
So Tim, Stokesy's at that last 2 overs.
Yep.
What would you have done different right now?
Didn't you watch the test documentary? We've been through this.
I did.
Right, so what did I say?
So we lost. We lost
Yep.
that test.
Yep. Oh, look, looking back at it, there was absolutely, I said on the documentary, the next day we went through it and I couldn't believe some of the fields I said on the last balls of overs. But, you know, pressure's a funny thing, and I made some mistakes. I think we all made some mistakes. We dropped some catches, we missed some run-outs, we didn't bowl our best at times, but yeah, I would definitely, I mean, you'd be a moron if you didn't do something differently, so.
We love you, by the way.
Thanks, pal. Cheers. It broke. Yeah. No, well, it broke badly, to be honest. And I couldn't find a surgeon that would fix it, to be honest. So I had 6 or 7 operations on it, and it either didn't go back together or didn't hold, or I came back, started training, and it broke again. So that went on for probably a couple of years until I came to Sydney, actually, and saw a surgeon up here who fixed it, and I haven't had an issue since.
Tim, can you just talk to us about, you know, in the early days, players were players, but now the way sport is developing, and I don't know if this is the influence of American professional sport or what, but players are expected to be a whole lot more than players, aren't they? They're expected to have views on things.
Yeah, they are. And again, I'm someone who probably stays out of that a little bit, but again, that's you know, we're role models. We've got a huge platform to you know, to share our beliefs and to set examples, I suppose, for young kids, and that's one of the things we talk about all the time, is being role models for Australians, for young Australians, and making sure that we're making our country and our fans proud. So it's something that we actually talk about at times. We have meetings about you know, how we're going in that space. Are we making Australians proud? But yeah, I think it's important for sportsmen with the huge following that we get, that yeah, we're setting the right example, and that's part and parcel now of being an elite sportsman.
And I know, yes, thank you. I know that you had some chats with one of the young cricketers in the room today. If your kids said to you they wanted to be captain of Australia, what would you think about that? What advice would you give them?
I would say don't. Only because I feel almost being a captain of a team or a leader, in my experience, the guy who wants it too much is actually probably not the best option. So if Charlie does come up to me and say, I want to be captain of Australia, I say, just lower your expectations and just worry about being a good player and a good team man, and whatever happens from that will happen.
And if he was appointed to the position at some point?
Good luck. He might be. He's actually batting really nicely. He's only 2. I'm working on him.
So you're not putting any pressure on him or
No,
anything?
not at all. Not at all.
All right.
I'll tell him to play footy, actually, because you get more chances.
You had that option, didn't you? You chose cricket
Oh,
over
yeah.
footy?
How long have you got?
Give us the 5 minutes.
Yeah, no, I didn't at all. I was an average footballer. I'm one of those guys that hasn't played since I was 16, so I've got better every year. But yeah, I played a little bit of football, but it was hardly at that stage where I had to make a choice.
Fantastic. All right, thank you everybody. Please thank Tim Paine.